Welcome to episode 62 of the Active Bariatric Nutrition Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Tirapelli, bariatric sports dietitian. Today, I'm so excited to have on bariatric athlete Kasey Morris. Kasey is a 38-year-old weight loss surgery patient living in Washington, D.C. with her boyfriend and 2 dogs. After undergoing gastric sleeve surgery in 2021 and losing over 100 pounds, she began sharing her transformational journey on social media, where she has built a thriving, supportive community. Kasey is the co-founder of the DMV Bariatric Meetup Group and host of the Former Fat Friend podcast. Since her surgery, she developed a love for running and has completed 9 races, with the longest being 10 miles. She is currently navigating maintenance, building muscle, and continuing to cultivate habits for long-term success. Thank you so much for being here again today, Kasey. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And it's funny to hear you call me a bariatric athlete, because I don't know that I identify as that, but it's kind of cool. Somebody else might.
Yeah. You know, I've heard folks say that all the time, and I always just say, hey, if you're purposely moving your body and you're achieving goals that you're setting, I consider that being a bariatric athlete. You're pushing yourself to do different things than maybe you have before, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit more, just so folks can get to know you a little bit more. Why did you choose to have bariatric surgery, and how has it changed your life?
Yeah, so I think my story is probably similar to a lot of people's. I have struggled with my weight since childhood. I can't remember a time when I wasn't overweight. And, I spent my entire life basically trying and failing to lose weight, did every diet under the sun. And I got to a point, I think, where I was like, I think I was in my mid 30s, and I just kind of got to this point of resignation where I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to be fat forever. This is just my lot in life, and was trying to be okay with that. And part of what I was trying to tell myself is like, well, I'm a healthy fat person. I have played volleyball for, my whole life. I was always active in sports. I was still playing volleyball regularly. So in my head, I was like, yeah, I'm a healthy fat person, so it's okay. And just so you know, I don't use the word fat in a derogatory way, hence the name of our podcast, Former Fat Friend.
Right. Sure.
So anyway, that was kind of where I was at. I think I was about 35 years old at this point. I went in for a routine checkup with my primary care doctor. She wanted to do some blood work, and I got my blood work back, and it came back that I was pre-diabetic, really close to the threshold for diabetes, and I had high cholesterol. And I think it was such a wake-up call, because it was like, oh, okay, like I'm actually not a healthy fat person. Like that, this is actually causing a problem. And so that was sort of the turning point for me of like, all right, I need to do something about this. And I knew that I had spent my whole life trying to lose weight and not being successful. And really, like, I knew there had to be another solution out there. So I kind of randomly, I was on TikTok one day and I saw this girl talking about bariatric surgery. And I was like, I knew that it existed. I didn't know that it was an option for someone like me. I was about 240 pounds. So I was obese, but I wasn't like what you see on My 600-Pound Life, kind of obese. And so I just didn't know that was even an option for me. And so when I saw her talking about it, I went down this rabbit hole of trying to, understand what is bariatric surgery, who can get it, how does it work, all of this stuff. And it really was like kind of a light bulb went off, and I was like, I think this is it. I think this is what I need. And I really had to advocate for myself with my doctors. They were not super supportive of it. I think they were just not as well educated as maybe they should have been. But long story short, ended up really advocating for myself for the better part of a year. Finally decided to just pay out of pocket for my surgery because it wasn't covered by insurance. And I had gastric sleeve surgery in November of 2021. I lost 105 pounds, and I've been maintaining that for almost 2 years now.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I feel like I've heard that. I can relate to your story in that, some folks, sometimes it takes, some situation or like lab work or just kind of like an aha moment where you're like, oh, wait a minute, maybe what I was thinking is not reality. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's kind of that moment where you go, okay, maybe I do need to talk to someone and ask for help. And that's okay. I feel like I've heard that, from lots of folks that can relate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also one thing that I've really learned through this process is that it's so important to ask for help. And I think especially with weight, there's such a stigma that obesity is your fault. It's because you don't have the willpower that you need to do it. And so like the only way to do it is to white knuckle your way through weight loss. And that just isn't true. And I wish I had known that years sooner, because that would have changed the entire trajectory of my life. And I think that's one thing I really try to advocate for on my social media platforms is like, obesity is a disease and it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like the GLP-1s have kind of started to get that type of a bad stigma of like, well, again, you're taking the easy way out. And it's like, this is a medication, just like someone that would take hypertension medication. That's not taking the easy way out because you're taking a medication that's treating something. I just feel like there's so much really unfortunate like misinformation and just judgment out there that derails folks. And it's really unfortunate. And asking for help and talking to a medical provider that can really give you your options, I feel is so helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's still such a stigma. And I hope it's changing. And, I hope I'm doing my little small part in the world to try to help change that. And I think you are too. So yeah, that's like the one message that I would give people is like, if you're struggling, ask for help.
Yeah, totally. And you also had a plastic surgery as part of this journey as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience? Yeah. And was it like, has it changed your quality of life? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, it definitely has. So I, obviously when you lose 100 pounds, you're left with loose skin. And I had plenty. So I was able to have a tummy tuck and a breast lift about a year and a half ago. And yeah, it really did completely just change how I felt about myself. I think for a while I felt like I wasn't done. I think a lot of people can relate to this where like when you have loose skin, it can feel like you still have weight to lose, or you just like, you kind of see yourself and you're like, oh, maybe 5 more pounds, maybe 10 more pounds. And like, you just can't even see the hard work that you put in. So it was really pretty life-changing to be able to have that surgery and to kind of like see, okay, like now I think I'm done. Now I think I'm good. I can, close this chapter of my life. And I still have loose skin, I have skin elsewhere on my body. So it's not like, I got rid of it all, but I do feel like it gave me a sense of closure on this process of my life. And it's just increased my confidence so much.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've heard from, a lot of folks that, become more active down the road after bariatric surgery, that the loose skin really is, it can be very much, restrictive or impact your ability to do those things. And I've had a lot of folks that just said it was just so helpful in allowing me to do more, then of course I've lost a lot of weight, which is wonderful, but going through that rapid weight loss phase, I had the extra skin. And so it's impacted my ability to do the new things that I want to. So did you feel like once you did it, it really allowed you to do more?
I think it was more of a kind of a mental freedom for me more than anything. I didn't have the kind of loose skin that impacted my ability to like run or, things like that. I mean, maybe I could feel it a little bit, but I was lucky in it that I didn't have that much. But it was things like I really love yoga. That's something I've learned to love recently since surgery. And every time I would like do yoga, I would like, feel my, skin pulling away from my stomach, and like it just felt funny and I felt self-conscious and it made me not want to do it. So I think for me, it was less of a physical change and more of that kind of like mental freedom of being like, I can move my body in any way that I want and feel good about it.
Yeah. Well, I like that. I'm so glad that happened. And I'm glad you had a good outcome with it. And you're happy with it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit about, because one of the things, I love your platform. I love all the, your posts, and you're just real, and you always share, hey, this is what's worked for me, and, take it, leave it, however, but you've shared your experience in a way that's relatable. What do you feel have been some of the most helpful, like behavioral changes that you have incorporated since having surgery that's helped you to be successful in this journey?
That's a great question. And I think sometimes I struggle to answer that because I'm like, I don't really know. And actually when you were on our podcast and we talked about this, I had mentioned something about intuitive eating. And I do feel like now I eat really intuitively. And I'm not quite sure how I got here. And you were like, well, intuitive eating it doesn't just happen. It's really like a long process of like building a really solid foundation of habits. And when I think back on my journey, I think the habits that I did early on are really what set me up for success now. So while I might not be as regimented with tracking or, weighing and measuring my food and all of that stuff, I did that for a really, really long time, like months and months and months. And I think those kind of set a solid foundation for me to now be able to just it just feels like second nature to, know what portion sizes to eat and to prioritize protein and just kind of do those things in what feels like kind of comes naturally, but actually it came from, a long process of, being very regimented with those habits.
Yeah. I know I saw one of your posts recently. You said something about, some of the things that you found to be helpful is you followed everything to a T initially. And It sounds like that's what you're saying here, which is through repetition and practicing these things, they became, of course, more natural and kind of just now second nature because you did them for a long time. But you had to put in that initial hard work of like, hey, this is what they said I need to do. I have to focus on protein food first, eating slowly, movement, all those things. But it's because you did that initially that you're able to, maybe not have to focus on it every single second of every day now.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I wanted to mention too is I think something that's been really impactful in my journey is community and support. Yes. So I didn't know anyone in my real life that had bariatric surgery, and I actually didn't tell a lot of people either. So I found this Instagram community and decided to, first of all, thought I would just document it for myself, and then found this community of people and really connected with people. And I genuinely think that has been a huge part of my success is just having people who understand what you're going through, people to kind of cheer you on. And it's things like silly little things like, no, well, not silly. I probably wouldn't tell people in my real life, oh, I lost half a pound this week, because they'd be like, oh, that's fine, I guess. But when you tell your bariatric friends, they're like, heck yeah, that is amazing. Like, I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy for you. Or even like with running, when I would run, 5 minutes without stopping, that was such a huge deal to me the first time I did that. And to anybody outside of this community, I don't think they would get it. But when you have people who like really understand you on that deep level, it just totally changes things. And I needed that more than I even realized. I think I needed that.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said earlier, with the disease of obesity having this stigma of like, oh, if you choose to have bariatric surgery, you're taking the easy way out, it makes folks not want to share because, of that judgment or that feeling of someone going, oh, well, that's the easy way, and it's like, oh my gosh, you have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah. But yeah, when you're around these like-minded folks that like, they really understand, like the community is very supportive and I find too, I learn from folks all the time, listening to other podcasts and listening to other people's experiences. And like in my case, working with folks one-on-one who are becoming more active after bariatric surgery, there's very minimal research on what should be the guidelines, right? What should be the gram per kilogram for someone that's, running a marathon that's had bariatric surgery for protein? We don't know because there isn't any research. And so again, it's hard to not have that to rely on. So you basically get that through the community and learning from each other and experiences and trial and error, so some of it's anecdotal and some of it, hopefully down the road, we'll get a little bit more research, but I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that information sharing is so powerful and it's such a great part of this community.
Yeah, totally. So let's talk a little bit more about that, running and walking and all the cool things you've been doing. Mm-hmm. So you've been a really big proponent of walking after bariatric surgery. I've seen that a lot on a lot of your posts. And you said even wearing a weighted vest has been helpful too, to kind of increase the intensity.
Yeah.
When you had your surgery, like how did you just get started? Was walking what you first started with? Tell us a little bit about that evolution.
Yeah. So I just started walking because I didn't know what else to do. So, I didn't have a gym membership. I didn't go to classes. So I was like, well, I can go for a walk. And I actually can remember, I lived about a mile from this really nice park, and pre-surgery, that felt like the longest walk to get there. It was really challenging for me to walk that mile to get there. And I can very distinctly remember like one of the first times that I walked it and I got there and I was like, that was easy. I'm not out of breath. Like, this is so cool. And that was such a good feeling. And then I just kind of kept walking from there. I think that for me, walking I'm such a big proponent of it because it's so low impact. So if you have any kind of injuries, typically you can still walk and it doesn't hurt your body. It's accessible. You can do it anywhere. You don't need any special equipment. You can just do it anywhere. I mean, barring bad weather, you can just go outside and walk. And I really have seen some of the best results for just fat loss and feeling good and, getting in shape. And I just love walking. So that was why I did it, really, was because I just was like, well, I don't know what else to do, so I'll go for a walk. And then also early on post-op, I actually tried to do some Orange Theory classes with my sister. She's very into Orange Theory and she's very fit. And I was so excited to try those classes. And I just couldn't, I wasn't eating enough to do it. I think I was still only eating like 700 calories a day. And I can remember doing those classes and feeling like I had the flu afterwards. Like I felt physically sick from trying to do that because I just didn't have enough. And once that clicked of like, oh, this is why I'm feeling bad. I was like, well, I can't do this until I can eat enough. So let me just like do what I can. I'll focus on the food. I'll focus on eating. I'll keep walking. And then when I'm ready, then I'll add something else in. And that's kind of what I did.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you listen to your body because that's so true. Sometimes I'll get folks that, they're like, maybe a month or two out of surgery and they want to start, training for, I don't know, like a 10K. And it's like, okay, baby steps, that's okay. That's an awesome goal. Like I'm pumped. I want you to do that. But you're taking in such minimal intake that, just like you said, you're not going to recover well. You're not going to feel well. It increases your risk of illness and injury. And, it just doesn't generally go well. Your energy level is not great for that type of higher intensity activity. So I love that you listened to your body and kind of just said, okay, what can I do right now with where I'm at with my nutrition? And I can build up. You can always build up, down the road. And you've done a lot of races. And I just want to point out that I love Lisa and Allie, who are your co-hosts for your podcast. They're always like, Kasey's always talking us into doing races. Tell me a little bit about what's the real scoop?
Yeah, I don't have to do much. I just say, hey, I'm signing up for this race. Do you want to do it? And they're like, oh, fine, I guess.
I love it.
I really don't have to twist anyone's arm for that.
Yeah. Because they're good friends. But what kind of distance, like how many, you said you've done several races and the longest has been 10 miles?
Yeah. So I started with a 5K. I think this was like one of those things I really wanted to do because I have never been a runner. So I couldn't even run 30 seconds without stopping before. So to me, like, it just felt like, oh, if I can do this, I'll feel really, really accomplished. So I signed up for a 5K. I gave myself like over 3 months to prepare for it. And I used every single one of those 3 months. I needed it because it took me a long time to build up that endurance. And I ran that first 5K and it was like the coolest thing. If you've never run a race before, you should do it. There's nothing like the energy at a race. And I can't even really put it into words. It's just something you have to experience. It's like, it's the best feeling ever. So I was so proud of myself for doing that. And it was so much fun. And then it just kind of, just like every time I had an opportunity to run a race, I kept doing it. So I did a 5-miler and then I think another 5K and then I did a 10K and then I had plastic surgery and then I was coming back from that. So then I did a 3K as like my first race back in and then another 5K and then eventually did this 10-mile race. And that was, and actually the interesting thing about the 10-mile race was I had a revision to my plastic surgery a couple weeks before that. And I didn't know when I went in that I was going to be restricted from running basically up until race day for like the 3 weeks up until race day, or maybe it was a month or so. And I was so nervous because this race had a very strict time limit. It was 2 hours and 20 minutes. I think it was, I don't know what that is, a 14-minute mile or something like that.
Yeah. Yes.
And I'm a slow runner anyway. So then I was like, well, I'm a slow runner and this is longer than I've ever run in my life. And I can't train for this race because I can't run. So I'm so afraid I'm going to they call it a sweep bus. There's like a bus that comes and if you're like, but you're too slow, they pick you up on the bus and you can't finish the race. I was so nervous that was going to happen to me. So what I decided to do was because I couldn't run, I was like, well, I can't run. I can walk. So let me see how far I can walk in 2 hours and 20 minutes. And I did. I just went out multiple times on multiple days and just walked for 2 hours and 20 minutes and saw how far I could go. And I got to about 9 miles, I think, one day. And I was like, well, okay, if I can walk 9 miles in 2 hours and 20 minutes, then at least all I have to do is run 1 mile and then I'll be okay. Yes. So I felt a little better about that. And so I did what I could coming up until race day with walking. And I think I ran maybe once right before the race. And then race day came and it was like the coolest thing ever. And I ran the entire 10 miles without stopping. Oh my gosh. I remember getting to the 10K mark and I was like, okay, I'm in uncharted territory now. I have never run this far in my entire life. And I think if I stop, I won't start again. So I'm just going to keep going. And I did. And it was very cool.
Oh, what a cool accomplishment. I love that. I know, because, there's ups and downs, especially when I've had lots of, different endurance athletes on, there's ups and downs in trainings, and injuries happen or setbacks happen, with surgery, whatever. And it's just kind of part of it. And, I think, you did what you could do. And I love that you said that, because it's like, look, I'm going to just go out and do the best that I can. The environment is so much fun. I couldn't agree with you more. Several people have said that. And I love that your advice was just like, you should totally try it.
Yeah.
5K doesn't matter the distance. It doesn't matter if you're walking it, running it, you're all out there. We're all trying to just cross a distance. And it's such a supportive environment, isn't it? It's so much motivational.
It's amazing. Yeah. Runners are like the best community ever.
I totally agree. Yeah. No, I agree. And so like right now, what are you training for, any races right now? Or do you have a strength training goal right now? What's kind of your current goals?
Yeah, that's a great question. I felt like I was floundering a little bit this summer. I don't have any races coming up, and it's also very hot running in the summer. So I kind of took a step back from running just because it was hot. So all I was doing was walking and like occasionally doing yoga classes at home. Sure. But I did a DEXA scan, and I did one about a year ago, and then I did one a couple months ago, and I had lost about, I think, like 3.5 pounds of muscle, which was not surprising given that I had stopped lifting weights, but it was disappointing to see. So I was trying to figure out like, okay, maybe I can get back to the gym, and I was struggling to do that. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll do at-home lifting, and that was a struggle. So I finally decided to start working out with a personal trainer again. I had my first session last week. And so that's my current goal. Is I really do want to build some muscle. I want to feel stronger and feel fitter. And I realized, like, the advice I always give is when you need help, ask for help. I needed help. Yeah. And so that's what I did. I asked for help in the form of a personal trainer, and I'm super excited.
I love that. And how many days a week are you doing that?
Twice a week.
Awesome.
Mostly because I can't afford any more than that.
Yeah, I know. It can get expensive. I hear you.
Yeah.
And so you're doing the 2 lifts a week. Are you doing anything else? Are you still doing your walking on other days? Or?
I walk pretty much every day. Yeah. And then I try to do yoga maybe once or twice a week.
Sure. And back to the, the running. So when you were like, okay, I'm gonna start doing these races, how did you change your nutrition, in those buildup as you got into longer, mileage? How did you change your nutrition from kind of your base, bariatric, intake to, okay, now I need a little bit more because I'm running longer, I'm walking longer distances. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was definitely a bit of trial and error. I don't think I really noticed, a need for a change in my nutrition until I started getting into longer distances. So like anything like 30 minutes and under, I was like, I didn't really notice a change. But once I started getting into like, I'm running for an hour and a half, then I really was like, okay, I'm hungry. I'm, feeling a little bit weak. I'm not recovering as well from this run. So for me, it was definitely incorporating more carbs. I remember doing overnight oats a lot. That was like one of my favorite ways to incorporate carbs. I also found I don't really get hungry in the mornings, but I was running in the mornings. And so I was struggling with like, what do I eat before my run when I don't want to eat because I don't wake up hungry. So what I found was if I ate something a little bit more carb heavy before I went to bed, that would usually see me through that run in the morning. And then I would, come home and have protein and whatever. Sure. I probably wasn't as regimented with it as I should have been, or as informed as maybe I should have been, but it was definitely just a lot of trial and error of like, how does my body feel? Are my muscles really sore? Am I sore for days and days? Then I probably need to change something. And then just kind of trying to go based on that.
Yeah. And I love that you highlighted, it's kind of the same rule of thumb I give folks too, is once you get over generally like 60 to 90 minutes, that's where the carbohydrates, like your body needs them really, truly, to refuel your muscle glycogen stores, to provide you that energy source that your body is drawing upon when you're doing that type of, longer endurance training, So that's generally where I see too, that folks are just like, once we get there, it's like, okay, we do need to take a look, like, can we add in some snacks? And I also want to highlight, I like that you said the night before, because listen, I get it. A lot of folks are like, there is no way I'm getting up like an hour early already when I'm running at, 5, 6 a.m. or whatever. Yeah. What can I do to help, and that's a really helpful strategy, which is just the night before we're topping off our stores. We're trying to give, a little extra blast of carbohydrate. And then, if you can tolerate something small in the morning, cool. If not, that can help. And then, like you said, you got home, you're refueling right away. You're having, do you eat like carbs and protein after your runs usually?
Usually, yeah. I think I don't tend to eat a lot of I eat carbs more in the form of veggies typically.
Perfect.
But when I am working out more heavily, I'll try to, incorporate more carbs like sweet potatoes or, other things.
Sure. And how about like race day? Do you carry fluids with you when you were doing those races?
So I did have a water for the 10 miler, not for the other ones. I did have like a water backpack for that one. I have tried the like gels and goos, and I think they're disgusting, and I just can't do it. So
I hear you.
I didn't actually fuel at all during that 10-mile run. There was I think at about mile 7 or 8, they had people were there with Oreos and beer, and you could stop and get those. So I took about half of an Oreo, and then I was like, no, I'm good. But I didn't actually feel like I needed it. But Lisa was working with you at the time, and I asked her what you told her to eat in the morning, and I think it was like rice cakes with peanut butter and maybe a banana or something like that. And I just did exactly what she did in the morning, and I was good to go.
You're good to go. Perfect. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I've had so many people that don't tolerate the gels and the goos because the consistency or the texture or just the concentration of sugar. For a lot of folks, it's too much. And bariatric or non-bariatric. I mean, everyone has to find kind of their fueling strategy that works. But yeah, whole foods can work for folks too. I mean, if you don't do gels and goos, just for people listening, I have lots of folks that do food like pretzels, graham crackers, applesauce, bananas in the race, dried fruit, where instead of, relying on the gels or the goos or what the course might have, carrying your own little things. So, things like that can work too. I hear you.
Yeah, I did actually. I brought with me little applesauce packs, the little like squeezy packs, and I didn't end up needing them, but I did feel like if this were like a half marathon, I might have needed something. It was like, I was just at the point at that 10 miles where I was like, I think if I were to keep going, I would have needed something, but I'm good for right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got to kind of find what works best for you. Absolutely. Yeah. And live and learn too. Like you said, like a lot of this is trial and error. And as you're like thinking back, you're like, you know what, if I go farther, probably might benefit from some. And, and that's something to practice in the training. You know what I mean? When you're practicing those runs. So what do you think, if you think back to, kind of the last few years, what do you think have been some of the biggest nutritional changes overall that you've made, whether it's behavioral changes around nutrition or just habits or your intake in general?
Yeah, I think one thing is I am very routined. Actually, my boyfriend talks about this because we moved in together this summer. And so I was asking him like, what's like the one thing that has surprised you? And he was like, I didn't know how routined you are in just life in general, but I think I really am. So I eat the same things pretty much all the time. I have the same breakfast every single day. It's a protein coffee shake. I meal prep. I pretty much always make the same like 2 things, and I eat those all the time. And I eat basically the same way for dinners. It's a protein and a veggie. And it's not to say that I don't eat anything else. I love desserts, and I will eat, sweets and treats and whatever. But I think I am very regimented in how I eat. And that is not at all how I was before. I would eat whatever I wanted. I think the other thing that's very different for me now is how often I eat. I eat probably 6 small meals a day. And one thing I've learned is I really struggled early on after I had bariatric surgery with this concept of meals versus snacks. And I was like, well, I know what I eat. I know what to eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I don't know what to eat for those in-between snacks. And what I ended up doing was just completely putting that out of my head and just saying like, it's just food. Food is food. And so instead of saying I need a snack, I just have another meal. So if it's like, if I've meal prepped stuffed peppers that week, I'll have one for lunch. And then if I'm hungry 2 hours later, I'll have another one. And I don't try to differentiate like, oh, well, this isn't a snack food, so it's not, I can't eat it now. And that's just worked a lot better for me, I think.
Yeah. And having some flexibility in that you're like, okay, if I'm hungry, I'm going to honor that and I'm going to have something to eat. It's okay. Yeah. And I love that you meal prep, too, because for folks that oftentimes are, struggling with, whether it's like weight regain or just not having good energy levels, a lot of times when we look at their overall patterns, it's like, we don't really have a plan. You know what I mean? And even though you might eat the same things and I find that to be helpful sometimes because it's like, I know what I like and I can make it easily. It's available because you're meal prepping, and when you need it, you have it. And that sounds like a really helpful strategy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's, I've just learned if I'm not prepared, that's when things start to go poorly. So as long as I have what I need on hand, then I usually am good.
Yeah. And I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier that we did talk about on your podcast, which was the intuitive eating versus the logging. So we were talking kind of about things that over time you've learned with your nutrition. So are you a logger? Are you more into intuitive eating? Kind of tell us how that's evolved over time. Because I think folks kind of have found benefits from, both strategies.
Yeah. So I don't track my food anymore. And it's so interesting because I did just meticulously for the first probably 7 months post-op. And I can remember working with a dietitian right around 6 months and her saying, well, our goal is not to have you track for the rest of your life. And I was like, what are you talking about? Of course it is. Of course, I'm going to track forever. This is working for me. I'm not going to change it. I couldn't fathom a world where I didn't have to track my food. And now I'm like, yeah, I don't know if you could pay me to track my food every day again.
Sure.
That would be a lot. But yeah, I do think, I think learning to eat a little bit more intuitively has been such an amazing side effect of bariatric surgery. I feel like I have so much more freedom with food than I've ever had in my life. And I do think that came about because of that tracking that I did early on. So I have a really good sense of portion sizes and, I think I always keep a mental log of protein. I think that's just so deeply ingrained in me now. Like I can't help it. I'm constantly thinking about like, oh, I got 30 grams in my coffee this morning. And then I had another 30 for lunch. And so I'm always kind of mentally keeping track of that. But no, I don't track my food. I really try to just kind of eat more intuitively. I think I am very much I like to live in balance kind of person. So I'm not, there's no food groups that are good or bad or off limits. It's just, what I try to kind of honor what I'm feeling. And if I'm really craving a cookie, I'm going to probably have the cookie because I've learned that if I try to restrict and I try to say like, oh no, I can't have that cookie because it's bad for me, I end up eating a lot of other things to try to satisfy that craving. And then I'll just eat the cookie anyway because I still want the cookie. So I'm better off just having it and moving on and, being okay.
Yeah, it sounds like you found a really good balance because I have that too. So I have folks that they initially tracked or they find it to be helpful that it gives them just goals or things to aim for each day, and they like to see that data feedback. So I have folks on both sides of that, like where I maybe I started with it earlier, now I don't want to, I don't need it anymore, and that's okay. Or I didn't used to do it, but now I find it to be helpful. And I think honestly, each person should find what is, what works best. And I want to ask you, because I think intuitive eating for some folks, and it means something different to everyone. What does it mean to you when you feel like you're really in tuned and like intuitively eating? What does that mean to you? Just so folks kind of understand that concept.
Yeah, I think for me, it means recognizing when I'm truly hungry and when I'm truly full. And that's something that I didn't have before. I don't think I ever truly felt full before, which is such a different feeling. But it's also kind of, it's more than that for me. It's like recognizing what my body needs. So I don't know how to explain it, but I can kind of feel when I need protein or if I really need carbs, I can like feel that. And I try to really honor those things. And then it's also the honoring cravings, like the fun foods that they don't satisfy a nutritional need, but they might satisfy a mental or emotional need. And it doesn't mean that like you are going off the rails and emotionally eating just because you feel like having a piece of cake one day or something. So I don't know if it's hard to articulate, but that's kind of how I would describe it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I think too, with intuitive eating, folks, it's just listening, it's honoring those cues, in terms of, I'm starting to feel hungry versus, okay, I feel full. And like you have mentioned, like when I was on your podcast, a lot of folks don't really know those cues. And so the surgery tool in and of itself can be a helpful, additional tool that can say, hey, you're full now. This is enough. And once you've practiced that a lot, you kind of learn that over time. And visually, some folks, okay, I know about 3 ounces. Because when you go to restaurants or things, people aren't going to be measuring stuff, but you kind of know once you've done this a lot, like, hey, this is usually my max. And usually my cues are, I feel a pressure in my throat, or I might have to burp, or, everyone has different cues that tells them that they're full or that they're hungry. And I feel like intuitive eating for folks, it can be a really complimentary, habit or practice to any strategy that you want to use, whether that's it alone or you want to do the measuring or you want to do the logging. They can all work together in conjunction, or you can pick one or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think tracking is such a helpful tool. And if I ever wanted or needed to make a change, that would be the first thing that I would go back to. So it's not to say I'll never do it again. It's just that right now at this stage in my life, I don't need it, but it's an incredibly helpful tool that I think is always going to be in my toolbox for if and when I need to go back to it.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective, because I know I talk a lot about logging and things like that for data, information, but I think it's important for folks to hear other perspectives too. Like, it's okay. You don't have to log. And I say the same thing, honestly, when I have folks. I don't expect people to log every day for the rest of their life. I don't log every day for, my whole life. I do it when I need the data. You know what I mean? And I feel like it's okay to have those types of parameters or times that you want to cycle off or whatever.
Yeah.
And, and that also brings me to another topic. So something that you mentioned on your podcast that I wanted to highlight, because we've talked a little bit about it on my podcast in different episodes, is creatine monohydrate. And you take creatine. Would you share a little bit about, why did you start taking creatine and how you feel it's helped you?
Yeah, so I actually just started taking it maybe about 2 months ago now. And I started taking it because Allie, my podcast co-host, heard you talk about it on your podcast. And so she mentioned it, and then I looked into it. And in general, I think my understanding is that women tend to have quite lower levels of creatine than men, and that it can be really beneficial in building lean muscle. I think for me, the bigger thing was I wanted something to help with muscle recovery. So I think that's where I've really seen a big difference is I just tend to recover faster. I don't get those I used to get, they say second day soreness is the worst. Yes. I had fifth day soreness from workouts.
What is going on?
Yeah. I'm okay, this is not good. And that doesn't really happen anymore. Which is, to me, I think partly perhaps I've been a little more intentional with protein intake, but also I think creatine helps a lot with that too. So it's an easy supplement for me to just add in. I mix it into my coffee in the morning. So it's I'm already making something. I just put a little bit in, and I feel like I've seen a big difference with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And just for folks listening, for creatine monohydrate, it's a compound. It's actually made in our body, right? It's amino acids. Our body makes it, but we do get it from the diet as well. So beef, poultry, seafood are our main sources, but you have to eat large portions of those to get up to the 3 to 5 gram per day dose is the recommended daily dose to get your muscle tissue saturated with creatine. And why do we take it? It's because if Kasey and I just get up right now and start doing jumping jacks, the first energy system that your body taps into is called the creatine phosphate system. And what creatine does is it basically sacrifices itself to help ADP become ATP, which is the energy currency of the cell. And creatine basically helps by donating its phosphate group to that so that we can keep exercising at a high intensity level. So, for example, if you and I are going to go lift or we're going to sprint up a hill, your body is utilizing that creatine as the energy source. So like you're saying, and I know folks kind of get it, they're oh my gosh, is this a steroid? No, it is not. It's not at all. And something that you mentioned, one of the reasons that it's helpful for recovery is that when we actually supplement with creatine, it draws water into the cells, into our muscle cells. And that fluid, number one, shows that you are a responder to creatine supplementation, which is a good thing because people kind of panic when they get on the scale. They're oh my gosh, I'm up a couple pounds. Should I stop this? No, it's normal. Your body's taking that water, and it's actually really helpful for muscle recovery as well and reducing inflammation. So have you found, do you feel like initially, did you notice any issues with water or anything like that were wait a minute, is this okay?
I don't think I did. I mean, as far as the weight, no, but actually it corresponded with the time when we got a puppy. So I wasn't weighing myself every day because I was waking up at the crack of dawn to take the puppy outside. So I might have, and I never saw it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, what's cool about it too is number one, it's the most studied supplement out there, creatine monohydrate, and they're now looking at it for men and women across the life cycle. So going from young children all the way up to the elderly. So besides its main benefits that we all kind of know, which is increasing strength, muscle power, now they're looking at bone density for women as well as brain health. So neurological functions, because our brain does use it as well. So it's kind of an exciting supplement. And like you were saying, it's helped you in recovery. I'm a huge proponent of it just because, again, especially for women, and men too, but especially women, we do tend to lose muscle mass as we age, and that creatine can help you just to be able to do a couple extra repetitions, and that's going to help you with your muscle.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Very
I'm
cool.
a big fan. Yeah, I saw that you had it on your Instagram, and I was like, yes, Kasey, well done. I'm so pumped. That's awesome. So is there any advice that you would give to, the listeners who may be starting on this bariatric journey that maybe you wish someone had shared with you?
Oh gosh. I think I would just say everyone's journey is unique and there is no right or wrong way to do it. So kind of embrace the journey that you're on. And, I think social media is such a good place for community and such a good place for support, but, don't get too hung up on because I ran a race doesn't mean that you have to run a race. You might find another activity that you absolutely love and that can be your thing. So kind of, this is your life. And so make it what you want it to be. But it's hard and challenging, but it's so worthwhile. I think that's all I got.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Awesome. And I want to highlight, so you started the DMV meetup and also, of course, the Former Fat Friend podcast with Lisa and Allie. Tell us a little bit about both of those and where folks can, maybe come to a meetup or to listen to your podcast.
Sure. Yeah. So the DMV Bariatric Meetup Group is the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. And we started it just because we saw a need for people to kind of take those connections off of the internet and meet in real life. And we haven't had a meetup in a while because me and my co-founder Elle, she just had a baby and I just moved and got a puppy and life has been crazy. But we will hopefully have a meetup by the end of the year. And so you can find us at DMV Bariatric Meetup on Instagram. Any meetups that we do, we'll announce there, and I'll also share on my personal Instagram. And then Former Fat Friend podcast, I actually met Allie and Lisa at one of those meetup events. They came to a brunch. Allie was just starting her pre-op diet and Lisa was a couple months post-op, and we connected there. We started hanging out, outside of meetup events, and we were having these really great conversations about all things related to, weight loss and movement and bariatric surgery. And we thought, I think this is valuable stuff that people might want to hear. And so we decided to start a podcast, and that's where Former Fat Friend came from. And so we are on all major podcast platforms at Former Fat Friend Podcast. And we are also on YouTube if you want video podcasts.
I love it. And like I said, I know I got a chance to be on your podcast a couple weeks ago. And I always tell folks when they say, oh, if you listen to this, I'm like, yeah, every time I listen to your guys' podcast, I literally either have a cup of hot tea, coffee, I don't know, maybe a glass of wine is what we talked about on the podcast. Hey, whatever. But my point is it's you guys, you're so relatable and your conversation is so, it's just helpful because you're sharing your own perspectives, each one of you. And I think so many folks can relate, and you don't always agree, and you've all had your own individual experiences. And I've found it to be so helpful myself. And I'm a dietitian, and I did not have bariatric surgery, and I love listening and learning from you as well. So I appreciate so much what you guys are doing on the podcast. And thank you, for everything that you're contributing to the community as well.
Oh, well, thank you. That means a lot.
I appreciate it. So very good. Well, you guys, please go check out the podcast. Kasey, where can folks follow you individually then?
I am at Maintaining Kasey on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for being on today. I appreciate your time and everything that you shared. Thank you so much. Everyone, please give Kasey a follow, but thanks for coming on today, Kasey.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, you guys, you can watch the full video of this podcast episode on my YouTube channel, which is the Active Bariatric Nutrition channel. So make sure to subscribe to it, give it a like. And also, if you don't mind just sharing this podcast with one person that you think would find it helpful, I would so appreciate that, because this is how we can help more folks that are on this journey learn and hopefully gain some important perspective from folks that have been through a similar experience as you. And you can also follow me on my social media, which is on Instagram at Active Bariatric, as well as my Facebook and TikTok channels. And lastly, if you'd like to learn more about my one-to-one bariatric nutrition coaching services, please feel free to go to my website, which is activebariatricnutrition.com, and schedule a free call so that we can learn more about each other. So again, Kasey, thank you for being here today, and we will do this again next week. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye.